All right, let's do this. Time to dive deep into all things Bigfoot. You guys have sent over a ton of stuff, research, articles, even some firsthand accounts. It's amazing. We've got folklore and hard science and everything in between. So, looks like we're on a quest to figure out once and for all, is Bigfoot real?
Well, it's certainly a mystery that captivates a lot of people, even without, you know, solid proof. This creature has really captured our imaginations.
It really has. Okay, so before we get too far into the weeds here, let's just start with the basics. What are we even talking about when we say Bigfoot? What's it supposed to look like?
Right, so if you could picture it, most people describe Bigfoot as this, large muscular creature standing upright, covered in dark hair. Most reports put him somewhere between 6 and 9 feet tall.
Whoa, okay, that's officially scary. But it's not always called Bigfoot, is it? I was looking through the stuff you sent, and it's got a bunch of different names.
Yeah. You're right. You see Sasquatch a lot, especially in Canada. And then you have regional names, too, like skunk ape in the southeast, grassman in Ohio, fook monster down in Arkansas. It's almost like as if the name kind of adapts to the description that people give.
So it's like a choose-your-own-adventure monster. All right, well, what about evidence for this thing? What do people point to when they say Bigfoot's a real creature?
Well, I think one of the things that people bring up first is the sheer number of eyewitness accounts that are out there. We're talking thousands of reports going back decades, and these are coming from all over North America.
But couldn't those be, easily explained away? I mean, I've mistaken a coat rack for an intruder before.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Some of them would just be misidentification or, just people's imaginations running wild. But then you have things like the footprints, right? Some of those casts are huge, like up to 24 inches long.
Whoa, seriously?
Yeah, and some even have incredible detail, like they'll show dermal ridges, which are those tiny lines like you have on your fingertips that make fingerprints unique.
Oh, right. So, it's not just someone out there stomping around in boots. It's got to be, a real foot.
Exactly. The Onion Mountain cast is one of the most famous for that level of detail.
Right, right. Okay, well, what about photos and videos? What about isn't there the Patterson-Gimlin film?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that one is practically legend in Bigfoot circles. But I think it's important to say that the authenticity of that film is, still up for debate. And a lot of the other evidence you see is, blurry images. That could just be pareidolia. That's basically our brains tricking us into seeing, familiar shapes. Yeah. Like faces or figures in random patterns, kind of like seeing a bunny in the clouds.
Right, the classic blob squatch photos. Okay, but speaking of intriguing evidence, I got to ask about those audio recordings. I know there are recordings of howls and screams and stuff, and then some people even think it's a whole language.
Yeah, there are some recordings like that, like the Sierra sounds, for instance. They were analyzed by a retired U.S. Navy cryptologic linguist, and he was convinced that they represented a real complex language. Yeah. Not made by any animal we know of.
That's wild. What about hair samples? I remember reading about hair samples being tested. Did any of those actually turn up Bigfoot DNA?
Oh, the hair samples. Well, they did a study back in 2014. They analyzed 30 samples that were thought to be Bigfoot. Unfortunately, only one of them turned out to be a primate.
Oh, no.
And it was human. All the rest, they were from bears, cows, even a fossilized polar bear. But here's the thing. That study, while it might have disappointed some Bigfoot believers, it actually shows how important scientific rigor is. By ruling out all those samples, it kind of sets the bar higher for future evidence.
So it's each test, you're narrowing down the possibilities. Okay, that makes sense. Well, so the evidence so far is, pretty mixed. What about scientists in general? What do they think about all this?
Well, the vast majority of scientists, they're not convinced. And their skepticism is understandable because we just don't have any solid physical evidence, No bodies, no bones, no consistent DNA. It's kind of like trying to prove ghosts exist, right? All we have are stories and maybe some shadows.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. What about the idea that Bigfoot's just really good at hiding? Maybe it's just, super stealthy.
It's an interesting thought, but then you run into some ecological problems. Imagine a creature that big. It would need thousands of calories a day. Could those areas really support a whole population of these big predators without us noticing a change to the environment? And then you've got extreme weather and changes in food supply. I mean, it's not impossible, but it would take some pretty wild explanations.
Yeah, that's true. It makes me think about all those nature documentaries where they find even the stealthiest animals because they leave tracks and signs that they were there. So if it's not Bigfoot, what are people seeing out there?
Misidentification is the most common explanation.
Mm.
It's usually black bears. They can actually walk upright, and their size can be super deceptive, especially like at dusk, or in really thick woods. And actually, if you look at the data, Bigfoot sightings, they tend to happen more in areas where there are black bear populations.
So it's a case of mistaken bear identity. But what about other possibilities, like besides bears, I mean?
Oh, yeah, sure. Sometimes escaped apes. That's definitely happened before, although it's pretty rare. And then, of course, you have, pranksters, people in costumes looking for attention or just to have a laugh. And, even feral humans. People living off the grid, they could be mistaken for something, well, more Bigfoot-ish.
Yeah. I have to ask, what about hoaxes? There's got to be some pretty good ones out there, right? Like people faking footprints or dressing up for the camera and saying it's Bigfoot.
Oh, absolutely. Some real doozies. The Minnesota Iceman, for example, was later revealed to just be a latex model. Yeah. And then there's Rick Dyer. He's kind of made a career out of capturing Bigfoot, but then his evidence always turns out to be, a costume or a prop.
Wow. So a lot of smoke and mirrors with this Bigfoot stuff, but that doesn't mean every single story is fake, right? There must be some accounts that are, well, genuinely intriguing and that go beyond just like someone seeing a bear or a person in a costume. What are some of those stories that you thought were most interesting?
Well, there's the famous Ape Canyon incident. That happened way back in 1924. A group of prospectors, they were near Mount St. Helens, and they claimed that they were attacked by ape men. Now, there's no, physical evidence to back up the story, but it definitely added to the whole Bigfoot legend, and became a really popular part of it.
That's crazy. Wasn't there a prospector who said he got kidnapped by a whole Bigfoot family?
Oh, yeah, Albert Austin.
Oh.
He told this amazing story about being held captive for, 6 days back in 1924 by a whole family of Sasquatches.
Whoa.
But, his account has definitely gotten a lot of skepticism over the years.
Right. Okay, so maybe take that one with a grain of salt. What else stood out from, all the stories you looked at?
Well, things get a little darker when you look at accounts from marijuana farmers. These are mostly in the Emerald Triangle region of California. They have stories of Bigfoot harassing them, even killing people.
Whoa, hold on. That's intense.
There's this particularly creepy story about 3 migrant workers who were supposedly killed by Bigfoot back in '93.
Okay. I mean, given the, shall we say, unconventional nature of their work, I can't help but wonder if there might be other things going on in those stories.
Yeah, that's a good point. Those claims are definitely hard to verify, and, they could be related to the dangers that already exist in that kind of business.
Right. Okay, what other intriguing accounts did you find?
There's this one that always gives me chills. It's a 911 call from this terrified homeowner who describes this, large, dark figure. He says it came onto his property, and what makes it even creepier is that he said his dog had been killed earlier. Like something got thrown over his fence.
That's so scary. He must have really believed that something was out there, like something dangerous.
Absolutely. And then you have Claudia Ackley. She claims to have found a Bigfoot, and she actually even filed a lawsuit against California.
Yeah.
Because they don't acknowledge Bigfoot's existence.
Totally.
She also ran a support group. For people who say they've experienced trauma from Bigfoot encounters.
It's easy to dismiss all this, but it does make you think, right, about the impact these kinds of encounters could have on people, even if it isn't really Bigfoot. Like, the power of believing something can be really strong.
Well, absolutely. But before we get too sidetracked, let's just take a step back here. We've got these intriguing footprints, blurry pictures, spooky sounds, and tons of captivating, even if questionable, stories. So, after all that, do we believe in Bigfoot?
That's the big question, isn't it? So what do you think?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that we just don't have that definitive proof. It's like we have a puzzle, but it's missing pieces. It's hard to see the whole picture.
It's really kind of crazy. We've been talking about all this evidence, right? Footprints, recordings, even hair samples. And still, nobody can say for sure if Bigfoot is real. But there's this whole other side to the Bigfoot thing that we haven't really got into yet, like how much it shows up in our culture.
It really has stepped out of the realm of folklore and become this a pop culture icon.
Bigfoot is everywhere. Movies, TV shows, those beef jerky commercials. I even remember playing Bigfoot video games as a kid.
Yeah, exactly. It's become this huge part of our collective imagination. And, it goes even deeper than just entertainment. Like, there's a whole subculture dedicated to Bigfoot. You have all these researchers and organizations, even conferences and
It's
museums.
like a whole world built around, a creature that might not even exist. And it's weird how it seems to like come in waves. Like every few years, there's something new, a new sighting or some kind of evidence surfaces. And all of a sudden, everybody's talking about Bigfoot again.
That's so true. Like, remember the Patterson-Gimlin film?
Oh, yeah.
That really brought Bigfoot into the mainstream. And even though it was filmed decades ago, people are still analyzing it and debating if it's real.
It's like each generation finds its own, way to connect to the myth. We add our own spin on it, our own stories, and it just keeps evolving.
And I think that speaks to like the power of folklore, right? How those stories, they really shape how we see the world. And it's important to remember that this whole idea of Bigfoot, it isn't just, a North American thing. There are so many stories about wild, hairy humanoids all over the world.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Like the Yetis in the Himalayas or the Yowie in Australia, right?
Exactly. And you see variations on it in tons of like Native American tradition. It almost seems like, this need to believe in something mysterious, something bigger than us is just like built into us as humans.
Yeah, it definitely, taps into our more primal instincts. Maybe it's the fear of the unknown, or maybe it's our desire to find meaning in a world that often feels really chaotic.
But isn't there also like a sense of wonder tied into all that? Like, wouldn't it be amazing if there was something out there, something that like breaks all the rules of science as we know it? Absolutely. It's the thrill of discovery, right? The idea that we might still find something truly extraordinary, that sense of wonder, that sense of hope is a big part of what keeps the Bigfoot legend going.
It's a good reminder that, we haven't figured everything out. There are still mysteries to be solved, and the world is still, oh well, full of surprises. But what if, and this is a big what if, Bigfoot doesn't actually exist? Like, what does that say about us? About our need to believe?
Now that is a fascinating question. I think if Bigfoot really is just something we made up, it really says a lot about our need to believe in something bigger than ourselves, something that, goes beyond logic.
Like we fill in the gaps in our knowledge with stories and myths that make the world a little more, well, magical.
Exactly. We crave mystery. We search for meaning. And sometimes I think those desires lead us to believe things that, that might not have much scientific backing.
But even if it's all in our heads, does that really make the Bigfoot phenomenon less powerful? I mean, just look at the impact it's had on, our culture.
Not at all.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it makes it even more fascinating. It shows just how creative our minds are. Our ability to come up with these really complex stories, these belief systems that capture people's imaginations for generations.
And it shows how those stories, they can become such a big part of our world. They influence our art, our entertainment, even how we see ourselves in nature. Speaking of the human mind, what about those stories we were talking about?
Right.
Where people claim they were like messed up by their Bigfoot encounters.
Oh, you mean like Claudia Ackley and her support group?
Exactly. I think that's such an interesting part of all this. If these people are really experiencing something, even if it's not Bigfoot, it makes you think about how powerful belief can be and the potential for psychological impact, even without like an actual threat.
Yeah, it's almost like a placebo effect, but for like fear and wonder. It's a really good reminder that our minds are super powerful. And they can create very real experiences, even if they're not, really happening in the outside world.
So are you saying Bigfoot might actually only exist like in our minds, in stories, in our collective imagination?
It's definitely possible. But, I think the more important point is that whether or not it actually exists, out there in the woods, Bigfoot has become this powerful symbol. It represents our fascination with the unknown, our desire to connect with nature and maybe even our need to believe in something beyond the ordinary.
That's a really cool way to look at it. So after going through all this evidence, folklore, psychology, what can we definitively say about, whether Bigfoot is out there?
Well, I think after all this, the most honest answer is we still don't know.
So we end up right back where we started with this big, hairy question mark.
Exactly. We don't have enough evidence. The scientific community, they're still mostly skeptical. And yet people keep telling these stories. And the belief persists. It's like, we've got this puzzle and we have some of the pieces, but we're missing those key ones that would let us see the whole picture. But maybe that's what makes it so great, right?
What do you mean?
Well, I think this whole deep dive has really shown us that looking for the truth,
Hmm.
you know, that search is just as important as the answer itself. It's all about challenging what we think we know, exploring the things we don't understand, and staying open to the possibility of the unknown.
Even if that unknown turns out to be like, just a bear or some big hoax.
Even then,
Uh,
because trying to learn new things, exploring the unexplained, that's always worthwhile.
it keeps us curious. It keeps us, really engaged with the world. And who knows, maybe one day we'll get that definitive proof and finally have an answer.
Or maybe, just maybe, the mystery itself is the whole point. The search for Bigfoot could be like a metaphor for our own search for meaning, our search for connection.
Yeah,
In this world, they can feel really, vast and uncertain.
I like that. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Bigfoot, well, it looks like we have more questions than answers.
But we also learned a lot along the way. We have a
Yeah.
better understanding of the evidence, the impact this has had on our culture, and those really interesting, philosophical questions that this mystery brings up.
And at the end of the day, it's up to each of you, our listeners, to decide what you think. Have we convinced you one way or the other?
Or are you still, are you still fascinated by the mystery, hoping that maybe something truly amazing is out there, just waiting for us to find it?
It's funny, is that we spend all this time looking at Bigfoot, from footprint casts to blurry pictures to stories about shadowy figures out in the woods. And it seems like, well, the more we learn, the more mysterious it gets.
Yeah, that's true. This deep dive has really taken us on a journey. Fascinating stories, scientific analysis. We even got into the psychology of why we're so drawn to the unknown.
And yet here we are, still asking that same question. Does Bigfoot actually exist?
It's the big enigma, right? We can look at the evidence, weigh the arguments back and forth, but at the end of the day, we're still left wondering.
So what's the takeaway here? Are we just chasing shadows? Are we letting ourselves get caught up in some kind of grand illusion?
I don't think it's that simple. Even if we never find like absolute proof, I still think there's value in searching. It shows our curiosity, our willingness to ask questions, and our desire to, kind of push the boundaries of what we think we know.
It's like we're hardwired to explore. Yeah. To uncover the hidden things in the world, even if those hidden things turn out to be, well, figments of our imagination.
Exactly. And this whole Bigfoot thing, with all its mystery and intrigue, it really taps into that. It reminds us that there are still wild places out there, things we don't understand.
And maybe that's the real magic of Bigfoot, It's not about finding a creature in the woods. It's about rediscovering our sense of wonder, realizing that the world is still full of possibilities, even if those possibilities challenge, everything we thought we knew.
Well said. I mean, think about it this way. Even if there's no like real physical Bigfoot out there, it's definitely found a place in our minds, in our stories, our art, even in our desire to keep searching for the unknown.
So in a way, Bigfoot has become like a symbol, representing something much, much bigger than just a creature hiding out in the woods.
Exactly. It embodies our curiosity, our yearning for adventure, and our hope that maybe, just maybe, there's still something extraordinary out there, something waiting for us to discover it.
And that's a powerful message, don't you think?
I do. It's a message that goes beyond just science or folklore. It's a reminder that we always have more to learn, more to explore, and more to be amazed by.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the world of Bigfoot. We may not have all the answers, but we definitely found some pretty amazing things along the way.
We did. We looked at the evidence, explored how this whole thing has affected our culture, and even grappled with some pretty big philosophical questions that this mystery brings up.
And now we want to hear from you, our listeners. What do you think? Have we changed your mind about Bigfoot?
Or are you still caught up in the mystery? You're still hoping that there's something incredible out there, something beyond our understanding.
Whatever you think, we hope this deep dive has made you want to keep asking questions, to keep exploring, and to always be open to the amazing things this world has to offer, whether they're real or just in our imaginations.
Until next time, everyone, keep diving deep.
Thank you for joining CMF Conspiracies podcast. What do you think about the topic we covered today? Comment below with your thoughts on this subject. If you have a conspiracy you wish for us to deep dive into, please send your topic to our email address or leave it in the comments. Thank you again for watching. like, and subscribe for more content like this.